this afternoon, along with Mr. Scott Dyson and Jandre and Tevs, our new cameraman, who will also be driving around heading back towards Arathusa. And just while I have the opportunity, I'd like to say a big warm welcome to a very special group of visitor Djuma junkies who are currently sitting in FC. We met them just a little bit earlier, and it's so great to be able to meet you all in person, get to spend a little bit of time with you chatting before the start of the show. This buffalo has been highly cooperative, for those of you who've been watching the Djuma Dam camera right up until now, before moving off. He's probably one of the oldest buffalo I've ever seen in my entire life. So I want to try and get an image of him for you before he disappears off. His boss is absolutely enormous. He looks to be blind in one eye. I really just want to get an image. Let me try and get that before I carry on with some further introductions. I might have to go looping around. It's just fascinating to see. We've been sitting for the last 5 minutes watching their behavior before the start of the safari. So let me do a loop around and get across to him. And whilst I do that, as I said, we have a group of visitors sitting in final control, and they will be with Nikki and Tara, who will be directing this afternoon's show. And this is a live safari, so everything you're seeing on your screens is happening right here on Djuma Game Reserves and Arathusa Game Reserve within the Sabi Sands. And not only are we live, but we're also interactive. So you can send us through questions like, why did you choose to take the bumpiest route around the buffalo? Would be quite a good one, instead of just reversing around the back of them. Because sometimes those thoughts come to you and you might want to know the answer to them. I'm not sure I know the answer to that one, by the way. I just didn't really want to scare them off. And you can send us through questions just like that, or other more complex ones, on hashtag Safari Live on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@WildEarth.tv. And please let us know, especially if you're a new viewer. We'd love to hear from you. We're very curious to hear your thoughts, and let us know if you are watching for the first time. Oh, buffalo. As my buffalo disappears off into the distance, which is not really what I intended. I really did want to get a view of his face, because he is an interesting looking creature and in such good condition for such an old buffalo. And I'm just waiting for them to relax a little bit. And whilst I do that, Barbara, you will have heard that one of Wild Earth's previous presenters, Tara Perry, was returning, and you were wondering when her last drive will be. That will be tomorrow afternoon, and I know that you're all very, very excited and looking forward to it, as am I. So that will be tomorrow afternoon for the Sunset Safari. Okay, come on, buffalo. Please don't. Stop there. Let me come and loop around you. I've spoken about you now. I feel like we need a shot, one last shot of that face. Interestingly, that buffalo's just turned around and looked at us on the right. He has taken such an interesting protective stance over the older buffalo. He keeps moving away from us and then coming back, watching us really, really carefully, and then moving between us. Now, I don't think much in terms of buffalo bonding. They're herd creatures by instinct, but I have read stories of acts of extreme, what's the word I'm looking for? Selflessness on the parts of buffalo in attempting to aid their fellow bulls. And it's generally only seen within buffalo, the emotional connection between them, but I don't know for certain. I don't think it's something we'll ever know, but I have heard very interesting stories about the bonds between them. And of course, we've definitely seen them, many video clips of buffalo returning to tackle lions that have shown that's generally the big herds. That makes sense to me. Why there's this spirit of camaraderie between buffalo bulls. Very interesting to see. They're knocking heads a little bit as we approach. Hello, boys. They're very, very skittish. Now, I'm sure that many of you have noticed it's incredibly windy. This wind has come howling through and brought with it plenty of dust. It has at least taken the edge off the heat. It's much cooler compared to yesterday afternoon. It's 24 degrees centigrade, which is 75 degrees Fahrenheit. About 10 degrees difference, I would say, between yesterday and today. Of course, I've made the terrible error in judgment in forgetting my jacket once again. Poor decision. Oh, buffalo, you just don't want to be seen today. Viewers who are watching, just remember that that is an option. If you ever get a chance to come and visit here, we'd be more than happy to see you and to say hello. But it is something that I think must be a really interesting experience, and it's great for us too to finally, it's something that I would say has been one of my biggest adjustments in being in this job, is that I've always had people on the back of the vehicle, and now I've got Liam, who of course is a person, but he's also the cameraman, and the real audience that I'm talking to feels sometimes not far away, but it's a really enjoyable process to get to meet them as well. And of course your questions make life that much more interactive and interesting. By the way, since our buffalo is not being very cooperative and I want him to just settle down a little bit, yesterday I showed you all a daytime moth that landed on my hand right in the middle of all of the interesting sightings that had happened. And it was indeed a fire grid barnet moth, daytime moth. Thank you to the viewers who found out what it was for me. How on earth you managed to do that, I don't know, because it definitely wasn't in any of my textbooks when I went through them. But a big thank you to all of you for researching into that. It's one of my favorite parts of these safaris. Ah dear, a buffalo just doesn't want to be seen. One of them's having a little bit of a sniff on the ground. So far he's been the gentleman who's been the most curious. The other two have moved up now from the dam as well, complete with their variety of oxpeckers hanging off different areas of their faces. Oh, one stop for a quick dust bath. I'm sure you can hear the wind. I think it's what's made these boys a little bit unsettled. It's very, very strong. I think, as VM said, it's a bit like being in Cape Town during the windy season. It's howling. These two boys having a very gentle headbutt. Here's our boy. He's sticking right at the back. He really is absolutely enormous in terms of height. It's the buffalo right at the back of your screen. As this one moves away, maybe if he turns his head you can see he's blind in his right eye where that oxpecker is pecking. His boss stretches almost halfway down his forehead. And yet look at him, he's huge, he's not thin in any way. He's in very good condition. But he's probably, I would say, close to maybe 13, 14, maybe even 15 at a push. Definitely an old boy. Very impressive that he's made it this long. Looks like a cataract that he's developed in that eye. I think it was a cataract. It could have been an old injury, possibly a thorn. But looks like just that milky white of a cataract. little bit now that they've relaxed. Let the engine run for just a few moments. You can get used to the sound. We can shift forward. It's not ideal in situations where the animals are just that little bit skittish to switch on and then immediately move position. Nice to give them a time to just settle in. Buffalo is an animal that is on the menu for especially lions out here, but it can definitely be on the menu for people as well. There are many people within Africa that eat buffalo meat. And Lael, you were wondering if subsistence feeding off the buffalo populations and the antelope populations, there you go, you can see that white shine of his eye. That's what I was trying to show everybody. It just took me a while. You can see he's in good condition. He's got a very interesting boss as well, but he clearly doesn't want to be on camera. I think I've given him a complex about it. I've spoken about it so much before I showed you. Anyway, sorry, Lael, you wanted to know if the local communities get fed with meat from the various reserves. Just giving a big wave to Taxon and our various Djuma junkies. Well, it is, I don't think it's allowed as far as I know. I doubt it is. There are certain reserves, including reserves that I've worked on, where there has been a quota of animals per month that will be handed across to feed staff and their families. I don't think that policy is applied here, at least by the rules. The odd bit of bush meat poaching is not unusual, especially close to the boundaries of the area. It does happen. We finally got to see our buffalo clearly. It has been very, very interesting. It's a difficult question, bushmeat, but it's something that a several 100-kilogram buffalo definitely has the potential to feed many, many members of a village or a community. So it's something that's to be considered as a food resource and a way of making the balance between the people who live around the reserves and the reserve itself sustainable in a way that they have an interest in protecting land that they don't otherwise necessarily have an interest in. Oh, this wind! Now, Donna, I've spoken a lot about this old buffalo, and you want to know how I know he's so old. It's a combination of things, but mainly it's the development of the boss and the way that it's stretched forward over his head. He's getting bald patches, and it's the stiffness in the way he moves as well. The best way to age him would be to have a look at his teeth, which is not something that I can do. I can't obviously get him to go and open wide for me. But generally you look at the wear and tear of his teeth. But he just looks, if I could just get a view of his face, I could show you what I mean, but he's currently watching the other vehicle move past. I'll try shift around one more time. We try, just so I can show Donna. He's got very ripped up ears. It's not a set and steady rule, but for the most part, animals that have a bit more damage, their ears are a bit more ripped up, they start to look a little bit, I suppose the best word is maybe shabby, but it's not really fair. It's just a little bit more careworn after their time spent surviving out here in the wild. Let's try a different approach. Let's try a loop. Hello boys. Please will you show me your face? I don't want to get right in your personal space though. Here we go. Let's try and get a view from there. since he has been a bit non-committal. But just have a look at that buffalo at the back. The way that his boss extends down the front of his forehead, that blind eye, all the dents and grooves in the top of his horns, and the shape of his face, the build-up of bone along his nose. He just looks old. Comparatively. Looks like he's been in the wars just that little bit more. Unfortunately, I think that's the best shot he's going to allow us, which is fair enough, I suppose. It is his choice entirely, and I don't want to shift around too much. And whilst we've been investigating this herd of Duggar boys and finding some interesting things about them, Scott has been out and about in Arathusa looking for the Salala Pride. So let's head across to him and see if he's had any luck, and I'll catch up with you a little bit later.
Hello everyone, and it didn't take long for our three-man team this afternoon to track down these lion. It was the same team that I was with this morning. The new cameraman Tebs, it's great to have him on board, and Jean-Dre, who a lot of you will know, are sitting behind me, and Tebs is behind the camera. In front of me, you've probably already seen 4 lion. They are members of the Salala Pride. We actually spent a lot of time with them this morning. They were in the same area. They've just shifted ever so slightly in search of shade as the sun has moved over onto the western horizon. And take a closer look. They're asleep for now, but we decided to come here with the hope that maybe, because there's not much water around at the moment, that there may be some potential prey that make the mistake of coming to Red Dam, which is a little pond off to our left, for a drink. If they do, of course, these lion will certainly wake up, and despite being fairly full of buffalo at the moment, they'll most certainly try their best to acquire their next meal. It's also not the warmest afternoon. Surprisingly cool actually for this time of the year. You'll notice the trees blowing in the wind in the background. That gives you an idea of exactly how strong the wind is, and that's helping to keep us cool. And I'm not too sure exactly how old they are, but I'm guessing about 1.5 to 2 years of age. This one that we're looking at here seems to be the most awake and alert of the... Oh, what was that? Was he about to cough up a little buffalo furball there? I think he was thinking about it, but you saw his head just kind of... You also notice as Teb zooms in, they're a little bit moth-eaten. They've been through quite a rough road over the last couple of months. They've been running from their usual territory, which is 5 Birmingham males. And when those 2 Matimba males arrived in the southern reaches of the Sabi Sands, this pride fled from them, and they will probably continue to flee for quite some time. They are certainly not safe where they are here, and that's from threats from not only male lions like the Birmingham boys or the Matimba males, but also the Nkahuma Pride. So they've got their work cut out for them. And along the way, oh, there you can see some guests enjoying this wonderful sighting as Tebs flashed past. You'll also notice the interesting thing with this pride is that there's a lioness who's missing her tail, and she's the one that is lying with her back towards us. Quite bizarre. And interestingly enough, I would have seen this lioness when she was young, just a couple of years old. She's 9 years old now, I'm told. And where I used to work in the southern Sabi Sands, I used to view this pride and her mother and aunts and her mother, possibly her mother, maybe not definitely her mother, but I'm told that it could well be her mother, that also lost her tail. Now, I'm not sure what this one lost her tail to, but I know her mother lost her tail in a skirmish with hyena. But quite incredible that the same pride of lion is almost gathering this trait of losing tails. And he's on his way to get a bit closer to the rest of the pride. Hello, boy. Now there's 3 young males, like I was saying, then the older lioness without the tail. There's also another lioness that we'll show you. Same kind of crop, from the same origin, this or the same time of year they were probably born. They all look very similar in age. And they're the last 2 members. So I'm told there's actually supposed to be 6 members in this pride. There's 1 lioness who's not around, and I'm not too sure exactly where she is or when she was last seen. For those of you who are joining the safari for your first time, I must wait for 2 weeks. So I've kind of lost track a little bit of what's going on. So give me a couple of days just to warm up and work out exactly what's going on. To all of the very, very kind welcome backs. There were a lot this morning, and it sounds like a lot more this afternoon. I cannot thank you enough. It's so good to be back on safari with all of you. And Genevieve made a comment that the bird man of Djuma is back and is away. So I'll hopefully be able to try and show you some of those. There was a massive flock flying around the quarantine clearings last night. And quite surprisingly, the woodlands kingfishers have not arrived yet. And I think they're a little bit late, but I'm going to have to get out my diary and work out when they arrived last year. But that's another great bird that we can look forward to seeing in the coming weeks. And you are in for a treat if it doesn't fly away. Look at how awesome this is. It's a longhorn beetle with the most incredible markings. There are many, many different types of longhorn beetles. Oops, sorry buddy. I'm just going to leave him on the dash to do his own thing. Oh, there he goes. But what a good sighting that was. Thanks, Jean-Andre. And he just tapped me on the shoulder and handed me this little gift, which was a longhorn beetle. I'm not too sure exactly which type of longhorn beetle that was. I don't recognize it. I don't think I've actually seen that one before, but I'll be sure to get out my insect book, or maybe some of you guys would like to try and work out exactly which one that one was. And maybe what we can also do is maybe the girls in the final control room can maybe put together a little slow motion clip of it opening up its wings and flying off. So maybe that's something we can look forward to seeing. Oh, well, what a surprise. Thanks, Jean-Andre. I forgot completely what I was talking about. Oh, about migratory birds. So, yeah, there should be a lot more migratory birds moving into the area. Not only the woodlands kingfisher, quite a few of them will only arrive in the later months going into the summer, whereas some have already arrived. But the interesting thing to know is that our bird population actually doubles in our summer months, all with migratory birds, a lot from Africa, but a lot from further north of that, Europe and Asia. So really looking forward to seeing some more birds with all of you guys. We were studying the sandpiper, this morning at this little waterhole. They're quite difficult to distinguish. I haven't seen it bobbing about here this afternoon, but there are a lot of wonderful birds out at the moment, and we'll be certainly keeping a close eye out for any of them. Now, the kind of problem we have now is I'm not too sure whether we should stay here for much longer taking a closer look at these lion, or whether we should head off in search of something else. So maybe you guys can send through your thoughts. My intentions would obviously be to come back a little bit later, but if we don't come back, I mean, of course, if we don't leave now, well, then we don't need to come back later. It's always a gamble. Something could come down and drink, as I said a little bit earlier, and that means they could get up earlier than expected, or we could probably could be in for a long wait until around 6 or 6:30 when it starts cooling down, getting a little bit darker. Let's take a closer look. And even though they're sleeping, they are beautiful cats. Great questions just come through from William, and he sent it through on Twitter. If you are joining for the first time, it is a live safari. You can send us through questions, hashtag Safari Live on Twitter, and questions@wildearth.tv on email. Now, Kevin's interested to know, have we any idea of when exactly this lioness lost her tail? And I certainly don't. It doesn't look fresh to me, so I would say at least 6 months to a year ago. A few more guests arriving now. The other vehicles moved off, and it must be said that the experience that you guys have is a little bit different to being here for a short period of time on one set vehicle. And a lot of the guides will have to race around trying to show the guests as many animals as possible in a very short period of time, whereas we have time on our side, which is great news. And we don't have to race around that much, and are afforded the privilege of being able to sit and wait. Then not only are we privileged enough to be able to sit and wait and watch these wonderful sightings, but we're also privileged enough to very occasionally watch a slow motion highlight for something like that longhorn beetle taking off. I wish I was watching it right now with you. I'm only going to get to see it later, but enjoy the clip and I'll see you when it's done. There are many different types of longhorn beetles. Oops, sorry buddy. I'm just going to leave him on the dash to do his own thing. Oh, there he goes! Welcome back, and I'm sure you enjoyed that. It's always quite interesting actually how a lot of the bugs have to open up their wings before taking off. And I'm sure some of you are busy researching, trying to work out exactly which longhorn beetle that was. It's a tough business, the insect world. There are just so many different types that to know all of them you have to be an absolute genius. But again, with so many people on safari with us, somebody is bound to have either the knowledge or the willpower to work out some of these strange things that we get to see, and we can't thank you enough for all your help you give us. You'll hear a Cape turtle dove calling in the distance, which is a wonderful call of Africa. It's one that I always miss when I'm away. A very widespread bird that you get through most parts of South Africa. What I'm thinking of doing also a little bit later, and please remind me to try and see if there's a scops owl, an African scops owl. We had a great view of one this morning, just on the other side of these lines. We can't see the tree that they were in from where we are, but I know a lot of you have been desperately urging us on to try and see the African scops owl, but this morning I'm told is the first time that request has been fulfilled, which was a very pleasant surprise and quite a great luck, as they are incredibly well camouflaged. I've got my book out here just to show you what we can expect to see. It's a tiny little image though, but you'll get an idea. And as Tebs zooms in, I'll point out at first the white-faced scops owl, which we do get in this area, and then secondly the African scops owl. So this is the one that we saw this morning, and it's also the one that lets out that call every 4 or 5 seconds. So that's something to look forward to. Sorry, I was just changing my radio channel there. I was on scan mode, so I was picking up game drive channels from both areas. Okay, so that's good. Now, my predictions for what is going to happen here is, like I said a little bit earlier, these lions will probably only start getting active at around 6 o'clock. So it's quite a long wait. That is, of course, unless some potential prey move into the area. Always a gamble what to do, whether to sit or wait, or to move off and come back a little bit later when it's more likely for them to be active. So do send through your thoughts. If any of you are feeling lucky or know of a herd of Nyala or buffalo on their way to drink here, then let us know. If not, we'll probably head off and see what else is happening. It's also quite nice after being away for a couple of weeks just to drive around, go and have a look at Arathusa waterhole, see how much the water levels dropped. I haven't got to nearly all the areas I would like to see after being away, so I'm looking forward to doing a bit of exploring. Also always interesting to see just how much the vegetation's changed and the little changes that do occur even in short spaces of time, like a 2-week period. Well, a huge thank you to Crystal in California for updating us that this lioness lost her tail 4 years ago in 2011. And not only that, but lost her tail the same way that her mother lost the tail to hyena. So maybe the hyena clan of that area have passed down the tale of one memorable story when the hyena won and managed to tear off the tail of a lion, and that's been passed through the clan, and then that same unlucky pride of lion had another member with that unfortunate fate. I remember her mother was in incredibly good condition. She was a really big lioness, and the fact that she didn't have a tail didn't appear to interfere with her health or well-being. Well, it always puts a very big smile on my face when we get to chat to some of our younger viewers. Isabella, aged 4, and Matty, who's about 9 years old. They're both watching, and good to have you guys on safari with us. I've missed you guys, and I hope everything's well back home. Now, Isabella's interested to know whether the lions ever get sand in their eyes when they're sleeping on the ground like this. And usually not, Isabella. So their head's a little bit off the ground, or their eyes are closed, so it's usually not sand that causes trouble in their eyes. But something that does happen to lions is when they're walking through long grass with tiny little seeds growing off the edge of the grass. Those little grass seeds can sometimes get into the lion's or leopard's eyes, and sometimes that can irritate them a bit, and you see them trying to pull the little grass seed out of their eye. It's not as easy for them. Their big toes and claws make it a little bit more tricky to get little things like grass seeds out. Our fingers are a bit better at doing that, but usually the sand doesn't bother them too much, and if anything it keeps them nice and cool in the shade where they're lying now. Even though it's not very hot, I guess they've got a big fur, coats of fur on them, so it's going to be a little bit warmer for them than it is for us right now, and that's why they're enjoying lying up in the shade. Happy to know you guys are watching, and we're going to race you back over to Jamie. She's found an interesting little animal she would like to show you. Enjoy.
Deep in the bushes, believe it or not, there is a little male bushbuck staring back at us. He was very comfortably out in the open. I think he may be our friend, who lives outside DRC, I think outside VM's window sometimes, but apparently playing shy. See if you can spot it. Let's see. And you see the outline there, an ear just moved? Looking for just that little bit of a twitch in the top of the middle of your screen. There are the horns, there you go. You must be able to see it by now. And just bear with me a moment, because I think if I shift, he's going to run away. But I think if we sit here, he might be tempted to come out a little bit more into the open. He's nibbling on the buffalo thorn leaves, which are nice and fresh and green, and very refreshing in taste. One of the few leaves I found out here that I can quite happily eat. Bland, but still edible, and actually quite healthy. It can be used as a replacement for something like lettuce in a salad, or maybe even baby spinach. Come on, bushbuck. What was his name again, Vin? One male?
I can't remember.
No, me neither. There we go, here we go. Hello, boy. That's a nice, big, impressive male for a bushbuck. Nice large horns. You see the striking little dots on his bottom as he picks his way oh so delicately through the bushes. And try and shift backwards a little bit. But I love watching the way that they move. Things like bushbuck and nyala and kudu, animals that are entirely suited to these incredibly thick habitats that we see them around, these thick bases around drainage lines. Where did you go, mister? I can see you. I can still see you, but summer's making things just a little bit tricky. Hello. Here you go. Horns poking through the top there. There's a bushbuck head for you. Those are a seriously impressive set of bushbuck horns. About all we can see, but I'm quite impressed with his size. And anyway, as I said, I love watching them move through these thick vegetation habitats that they live in. They seem to do it so effortlessly without even looking. There's some peripheral sense that tells them when to lift their legs up over a log. Look how he disappears. We are maybe 15 meters at the most away from him. You would never ever know that he was there if we hadn't just seen him nice and out and in the open. Oh, nice little quick link to something that we don't get to see all that often. There's not that many bushbuck wandering around, but I know that Scott is still out and about, so let's head back across to him, and I will be traversing around Djuma and looking out for anything else we might find. See you in a little bit.
So, I think it's going to be our best option to head off and stay in this general area, but drive around and see what else is going on out here. Like I said a bit earlier, these lions are probably not going to be up to too much for the next while, and I think it's worth us taking the risk of going elsewhere. And we've just got through an update from Kathleen. Thanks, Kathleen. Saying that there's a huge herd of waterbuck at the Arathusa waterhole. And not only that, but there's also a tiny new baby hippo that lives there. So it's going to be a worthwhile adventure to head across there and see what's going on. Oh, sorry guys. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll go another way, it's all good. All good, how's it, Peter? How are you doing? Yeah, maybe let me go this way. Sorry, we've got ourselves into an unlucky traffic jam here. But I'll be able to squeeze through this little gap. Okay, so we're not too far away from the Arathusa waterhole, And I'm just going to get on the radio quickly and just mention to everyone that I'm leaving this sighting so that they know. Anybody else who may be wanting to make their way there as a third vehicle can now do that. $2, I've read down. Quite nice earlier on before we headed out on drive. We got to meet some of the viewers. I think it was Tim and Terry and Liz and Carol, if my memory serves me correctly, and they're out all the way from America and Canada on safari. They've already been on safari for about 9 days. Have had absolutely wonderful viewing so far, and I've still got another 3 nights at Djuma and a couple of nights elsewhere thereafter. So they're enjoying being out in Africa. A couple of them have been before, the others haven't. But always wonderful to meet some of the viewers. So be sure to get a hold of us in advance and let us know if you are coming out on safari, because we would love to show you around a little bit and get to meet you in person. Always a relief to hear that people who've traveled so many thousands of miles to come on safari are having a good time and also having good luck, because for those of you who are new to the safari experience, luck plays a very, very important role on what you see and the quality of your sightings, and they've been incredibly lucky thus far. A lot of you may have wondered what that funny cement circle was that we drove past, so we'll get Tebs to just zoom across onto it for you. And I'm just going to keep going around in circles while he does that. This is a fire pit, that's our shadow. And what happens while you're out on safari, sorry if some of you are getting dizzy, I promise you it's the last time I'll do this. But what happens is you have bush dinners, and basically you come out into the bush on safari, after your safari, and the camps may have set up a beautiful dinner for you, and they've obviously got a roaring fire in that big concrete pit. So that's what that is used for. Just going to hop out quickly and remove this branch. Oh, my earpiece has fallen out, which I've just noticed. This is a silver cluster leaf. It's not a very hard wood, so even though it looks like quite a big branch, it's not very heavy. Whereas if it was one of the bush willow trees, it would have been a lot more difficult to lift up. So not the hardest of woods, quite easy to bend and break. And I'm not sure what the elephant would have been doing, but I can see some elephant tracks here, and it may have moved this branch out of the way to access some fresh green shoots or grass that's been growing up underneath it, and popped it in our way on the road. Okay, now my earpiece is back in. Good afternoon to William, and thank you very, very much for your research on the longhorn beetle that we got a glimpse of earlier. Sadly though, William says there are just so many longhorn beetles in South Africa that it's hard to make a decisive decision as to which one he thinks it could be just yet, but he is still searching and trying, so thank you so much. And wasn't it such an awesome little bug? You get one that's a bright metallic green color that I hope we find in the coming weeks. Really awesome colorations, and they also vary quite greatly in size. I mean, that one, as you saw, is probably about an inch long maybe, whereas others are as big as 2 inches, so they can be quite large. Always very easy to kind of distinguish because they do have those characteristic long antennae. I'm not sure who's spreading the word about safaris in New Zealand, but whoever you are, thank you, because there seem to be a lot more New Zealanders tuned in. And Rochelle, you one of them. Good to have you on board, and thanks for sending your question through. I'm guessing that you are new or slightly new to the Safari Live experience, and that's why you're not too sure what the purpose is of the people sitting up on the bonnets, as we call it here, or the hood, as you may call it in a lot of other countries, of the vehicle. And those are the trackers, a vital part of the team who help take people on safari. It's certainly not just the guides who have their work cut out for them sitting in the driver's seat, but also the trackers who actually focus on trying to find animals by searching, and also searching for their tracks on the road. Because they've got a good vantage point of the road from where they're sitting, they're in an easier position to spot the tracks. They also don't have to continually talk to the guests, and they've got a little bit of distance between them. The guide usually does all the talking, and the tracker generally remains fairly quiet on the front of the vehicle, focusing on listening, looking, and finding tracks. Once the trackers found tracks, the guide will then often drop them off with a handheld radio and possibly loop around to wherever the tracker suggests he goes and checks for tracks. And it makes for a wonderful experience having a tracker on the safari experience. So that's what those guys are doing up there. Rochelle, the art of tracking is an incredibly awesome one, and the Sabi Sands has got some of the best trackers in the world, without a doubt. The local Tsonga people of this area have spent their lives growing up in very similar surroundings and seem to have an eye or a knack for finding the animals simply by following their footprints, which along a sandy road like this can be fairly easily. But as soon as they veer off into the bush, it becomes incredibly tricky. Good to have you on safari with us, Rochelle. And again, thanks for sending that question through. You must have been wondering, what on earth are those people thinking, putting a seat on the front of the vehicle there? But there is a method to the madness. I must say a very big thank you to everyone who's sending through questions and comments. It really does make for a fun safari. And Pamela has now sent through a question on Twitter, and she's interested to know a little bit more about the bush dinners that happen out here, and whether or not lion or leopard, or I guess any other dangerous animals have ever stumbled upon them. And yes, they do fairly often. but it's usually simply because they're on a pathway from one area to another, and you find yourself in the middle of that pathway. They usually don't come in too inquisitively to look, and to be honest, they're usually not even that interested in us. They just want to move by. But I've had all 5 members of the Big Five stumble upon various bush dinners, sometimes a little bit more hair-raising than others. And some of our viewers will even remember it wasn't quite a bush dinner, but we had a fire out in the bush. It was for Big Cat Week last year, and it was probably early December or late November last year, where we had set up a beautiful big campfire. Hayden Turner, one of the other presenters, was sitting on a log with the fire in front of him, and Peter Pretorius was in a leopard sighting with a young male leopard called Djuma. And that same male leopard left the bush where Peter was following him, and Peter followed him all the way to the campfire. Well, not right to the campfire, but about 40 or 50 meters away. And then the leopard climbed up a marula tree, and it was perfectly in shot directly behind where Hayden was sitting. So just the most remarkable luck. And it lay there for quite some time, I think, before it came down the tree. But some strange things do happen out here. Pamela, thankfully though, the animals out here typically don't want to harm us, and they usually don't cause too much trouble, but it certainly does make your heart start racing. I remember working at a camp in southern Tanzania in an incredible wilderness area called Katavi National Park, spelled K-A-T-A-V-I, if any of you are interested in looking it up. And at this camp, it was a semi-permanent camp that was only open during the dry season. We just had 6 little tents and a maximum of 12 guests that would come there. But the camp was built underneath beautiful, beautiful big trees called tamarind trees. And the fruits from these tamarind trees are irresistible to elephants. And at this time of the year, when we were setting up the camp and for the first few months of it being operational, the tamarinds were dropping their fruits all over this little camp, where on top of the tents, in and around the tents, and almost every single time we needed to get from one room to another after dinner, between meals, I had to almost dodge with the guests, like running from one tent to another, then back to another tent, because the elephants in that area were quite hostile. There's sadly still quite a lot of poaching up in Tanzania, and it was a gauntlet almost on a daily basis. Once you were in your tent, it was actually perfect, because then they would come up to it and start scraping the fruits off the roof of your tent with their trunk, which was wonderful, but getting to your tent often proved problematic. Happy to hear that there's a whole classroom full of kids in Missouri whose teacher's Mrs. Patos, and they're all watching this action with us, and they've been picking animals on a daily basis to ask questions about. I think yesterday was lion, and today they're on the topic of elephants, and would like to know, how long do elephants live for? It's a good question and an interesting answer, because they live longer than any of the other large mammals in this area. Up to about 60 years would be the average lifespan of an elephant, whereas the lifespan of a buffalo, another big animal but not quite as big as the elephant, would only be around 20 years. And hopefully it won't take us too long to actually find you some elephants to look at. I did see some elephant tracks coming down towards the waterhole, obviously from earlier today, and who knows, maybe another herd will arrive a little bit later. And thanks for that question, Madison, and thanks to your teacher for letting you watch the safari. Now, if we take a closer look up ahead, there's some geese in the water, and I'm very interested to do a head count, because before I went on leave, these were tiny little goslings, and there were 7 of them. And there are now 1, 2, 3, 4. Hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are still 7. These Egyptian geese parents have been doing an incredible job looking after their chicks, because for all 7 of them to still be alive is an incredible feat. So many different animals will prey on them: monitor lizards, birds of prey. So their goslings have got a lot of thanking to do for getting all of their siblings through to this stage. What a pleasant surprise. Some of you will probably remember when we first saw them, they were probably about 1/4 of the size as they are now. There's a few other birds just to the left of the Egyptian geese that I'd also like to show you. And these are African jacanas. And interestingly enough, the parenting of this bird is done only by the male. He incubates the eggs, cares for the chicks, and the female runs off, mates with another male, and leaves him with more eggs to raise. So the adult's the one with the little blue coloration on the top of his beak, and the youngster is just behind him to the left. And now we've got both species in the same shots. Some that have 2 parents that raise them, and another one with just 1. What I'm going to do is get my book out quickly and just show you a closer picture of the African jacana, as they're not the biggest birds, and from there not too easy to see. There we go, right in the middle here. Great. They've got massive long toes which help them essentially walk on water and disperse their body weights. And you can see this is a picture of the youngster. Looks very similar to, I guess, what you may have seen. An interesting page full of birds. Look at how awesome this one is up here, the greater painted snipe. I've never seen one before. They're incredibly rare. And also the African snipe, which I have seen but very rarely. And then right at the top we get 2 of the crakes, the African crake and the corn crake. Again, 2 very rare birds that you very rarely see, but something to look forward to, and maybe we'll get lucky. The corn crakes live really marshy areas that we don't have any of at the moment due to the very dry conditions, but they like kind of seasonal swamps and marshes. And we'll be keeping an eye out in those areas if we do get some rain at some stage, or at least a lot more rain. Good. Well, now we're gonna move off, and I've been keeping an eye out on some hippo. There are the backs of 2 hippo poking out of the water to our left. I haven't managed to see a tiny baby. But let's actually just spend a little bit more time here before we rush off and see if we can't get you a glimpse of this newborn hippo. I'm not too sure how old it is exactly, think I can see it. It's with the ones on the right there, Tebs. That's the mother we can hear calling. So if you zoom into the one on the right, Tebs, look closely, you may be able to see the little baby porpoising like a little dolphin. It probably won't be able to stand where its mother's standing, so it's going to be jumping up using its back legs to get to the surface in order to be able to breathe. There it is, poops, and back down. Awesome. Now let's see if it makes this noise again. That's me doing it, but that's the noise you need to look out for. Oh, and it looks like another hippo is coming to greet them. I wonder why the mother's getting so worked up. She seems to be moving around with quite a lot of intent. Look at how cute the little baby is there, just poking its head out. It's tiny. What are you eating? You aren't supposed to be eating anything in here. You eat grass, Mom. Maybe it's just some kind of a display. I'm not sure if any of you saw that, but she's appeared to take in a mouthful of this. Oh, be careful you don't swallow your baby. They've got such big mouths. But this is bizarre. I'm not too sure exactly what it's doing. Like I said, they usually don't feed on aquatic plant matter. It's just grass that they'll feed on usually. So I'm not too sure exactly what that was all about, but so happy that we're getting a few glimpses of her and her youngster. There don't seem to be nearly as many hippo here as there used to be, or though maybe that's just me not being able to see them very clearly. I think there are a few hidden under the beds of reeds and are just poking their nostrils up every few seconds to take a drink. But as the water begins to dry up here, and well as food moves off, they may find that hippos that used to stay here have decided to try and find a better home until more rain arrives. Thanks very much. It's great that she's going up onto higher ground quickly before I carry on, but thanks very much for the updates that you've been. This female does tend to be quite aggressive towards other hippo who come too close to her calf, and rightfully so. She needs to take great care of it. And look at how small it is. If she goes any further out the water, it might follow her, and then we'll get some incredible views. Now, what I think she may be doing at the moment, the very dry conditions, she may well even be supplementing her diet with a little bit of vegetable plant matter, or aquatic plant matter rather, even though it's not typical. Maybe in these tough drought conditions, and the fact that she is busy nursing a calf is forcing her to feed on some rather abstract. What is going to happen here? Please, can she go further out the water, because I'm almost certain the calf will follow her. Come on. Yes, keep going. Wonderful. Can you believe how much smaller it is than her? It's tiny. Oh, plumps. And then she just plopped herself back down again. but who knows, maybe the mother will get back up or the calf will run around in front of her, giving us a better view. Well, a huge thank you to Deborah in Kentucky for updating us that this little hippo calf is apparently only 10 days old. An incredibly new addition. And I'm guessing there's a big thanks to the Arathusa waterhole camera for helping provide us with that information. I'm not sure how else exactly they would have worked out that there was this new addition if they weren't monitoring their post so closely. There's the youngster that has just popped out onto the other side of it and rolling about completely upside down. And it's a bizarre thing that hippo do occasionally do. Obviously just playing about. There's one hippo that I remember in the southern Sabi Sands, whenever you arrived at a waterhole, like clockwork, it would perform this rolling action for you. But I've yet to ever find. Thankfully we're in no rush to get you across to Jamie. She is just wanting to, I think, test your guy's skill. Now that the hippos seem to have temporarily calmed down, it would be a good time for us to send you across to Jamie for your tracking quiz, and we'll be waiting right here for your return.
Welcome back, and I really don't want to take you away from your hippo sighting for too long. I also have to shout over the sound of the wind, but I have a track quiz for you all, and I want to see if you can get this one right. I've got two tracks for you. One is here. What has made this? That track. And I want to see if you can guess, and not only do I want to know the animal that has made both of these tracks, which animal, I want to know which body part it has come from. And of course, if you have just joined us and you think that you might know the answer, you can send your answers through to #SafariLive on Twitter, or you can email through to for too much longer. Just wanted to pose that as an interesting question before moving on through Djuma. So let's head back across to Scott and his entertaining hippos, and I will be back with you a little bit later.
Well, interestingly enough, oh, look at the little baby. You really gave her mother a big nudge there. The screen was also kind of playing around with all this aquatic plant matter in its mouth. So, I'm not too sure what to read into it, but interesting that this other hippo was also kind of tossing this weed around in its mouth. Let's see if this young hippo calf doesn't give its mouth a little bit more of a hard time. Maybe it's wanting to suckle, I'm not too sure, but it really did jump up into its mother's face saying, "Come on, Mom." But she didn't seem to take too much heed of that. Now earlier on I said I'm not too sure how many hippo have actually always lived here, but I seem to think that there are less than normal. And Rochelle in New Zealand is interested to know exactly how many could be here. Well, it's the mother and the calf that we can see, then the one in the foreground, or kind of in the center of the screen, another one next to it that's just poked its head up, another one to the right thereof, then one off to the left there. So where are we now? I haven't even been counting. Now it's 4, 5, 6. So there's about 6 or 7, I'm guessing, but I think there were maybe about 10, 11 or 12 a few weeks ago. But I'm sure some of our other viewers may have been keeping closer tabs than me on these hippos. So if any of you know the exact numbers of this pod or raft of hippos, depending on your preferences, either can be used as collective nouns, please let us know. But it looks like 6 or 7 for the time being. Good afternoon to Deb in Ohio, and you've asked a question that I'm not going to be able to answer very effectively. Oh, the one hippo is doing another spinning roll there, and she's interested to know 2 things. How long will a hippo calf nurse for? And also, can they nurse underwater? Now, that is a good question, Deb, and I've heard mixed things on it. I've heard some people say that they can nurse underwater. I find that hard to believe. With the structure of their mouth and the size of their mothers, I just don't see how they'd be able to nurse underwater without slurping in massive amounts of water along with their milk. But I have heard that they can. I just am battling to convince myself into believing that. How long exactly they'll nurse for, I'm not too sure, but I'm guessing. My hippo filing cabinet has been rusted closed, and I need to pry it back open to access that knowledge. So if any of you do know more concise facts about how long hippos will nurse their young for and whether they can actually nurse them underwater, please let me know, and I'll share it with everyone else who's on. One thing I do know is the answer to Donna's question, and she sent through a question on Twitter. Hello, Donna. She would like to know, will they go out onto land after dark? And yes, both the adults and the young calves will go out and feed around the waterhole at night. Obviously, this mother is in a tricky scenario. So she's going to be forced to stay nearby, which probably isn't ideal for her grazing, but it is important for her calf's well-being. But the calf will come out on these little foraging missions with her at night time, and as it gets older, I'm sure they will start to move further and further afield. Big thanks again to Deb, who's updated us that the mother was grazing on the lawn in and around Arathusa, the camp that is just in the background of where we're viewing now. And while the mother was grazing, the calf was taking little naps nearby. That must have been really cute to watch. Okay, I'm just going to reposition now, get us a little bit closer to the large herd of waterbuck, and then probably start thinking of heading back towards the Salala Pride of Lion. have just got some confirmation through from Tara, thank you very much, who's sitting in the final control room, and they nurse for up to around 8 months. So battling to believe, and even though just like the adults, the young calves can close their nostrils, flap their ears back to prevent water going in their nose, with the can move, but obviously there's a way that it somehow creates a suction. Isn't that incredible though? You would never think that they would be able to, well, I would never think that they'd be able to nurse underwater. And again, a big thank you to Tara for confirming that that does happen for us. Let's take a closer look at these waterbuck. They're in a wonderful open clearing here. And in the background there with their bright blue heads, a wonderful scene here in front of the Arathusa camp. And again, thanks very much to the update we got. And that was Kathleen. So thanks, Kathleen, for this beautiful camera. And if any of you are joining the safari for the first time, it's important to know that there are two 24-hour-a-day waterhole cameras that survey over the Djuma waterhole as well as the Arathusa waterhole. So it's a great way to be able to hear the sounds of the bush and see the sights of the bush. And quite often we wake up early in the morning and have wonderful reports from you guys informing us of leopard drinking or lion drinking, heading in certain directions, which help us start on the front foot and go straight into that area to follow up and see if we can track those animals down. I'm not sure you because the wind was blowing towards us, and that is a helmeted guinea fowl calling. Not the same ones that we're looking at, but the same type of bird. The one we can hear calling is a little bit off to our left, and the others seem to be chasing one another around wildly. They're incredibly quick. And I know I've told some of you before that they'll run the 100-meter sprints in predators. Well, Sandra, I must thank you immensely for helping to solve the puzzle that is, how does the baby hippo suckle underwater? And apparently what happens, now this is also hard to believe, but it's making it more believable, the whole story, is that wrap its tongue around its mother's teeth. Sandra, will wrap its tongue around its mother's teeth, creating some kind of a vacuum, and then be able to drink milk without having to worry about drinking water alongside it and diluting it into a muddy milkshake. So thank you, Sandra. And see what they're up to.